Welcome to EMDR Chat with Curt and Michelle. I'm Dr. Curtis Roundson.
And I am Dr. Michelle Gottlieb, and it's good to see, be with all of you.
Absolutely.
So, Curt, questions that we get lots of questions all the time of making sure people want to make sure they're doing EMDR therapy correctly and doing right by their client. And a question that I've gotten a lot recently, and I wonder if you have as well, is how do I know my client is actually okay, ready, grounded, okay to end the session?
Well, that's a good question.
Thank you. I thought so. All right.
Well,
do you have a good answer?
I think I have several, but
Okay.
and I suspect you do too.
I
But
do.
how about we start first with reminding everyone that one of the best ways to be able to close a client up at the end of a session is to have done an adequate preparation, phase 2.
Oh, yeah. Let's go back to phase 2 preparation. That's a good point.
Yeah, because in phase 2 preparation, after our history taking, one of the things we do in history taking, we assess by how they're able to give us their history, their emotional regulation ability. As we've talked many times in our trainings, if someone begins to tell you their history and they begin to emote strong emotion, have a difficult time pulling it back together at the end of a session, just in telling us their story, well, that's a kind of a little bit of an assessment tool to know that we may need to spend more time in phase 2 preparation, which is teaching them not only the mechanics of what EMDR is, but things like safe, calm place, relaxation techniques, grounding techniques. All these containers, yes, ways to contain emotion. The whole point of that is to help them learn how to shift states. That is, move from an upset state or an angry state, a strong emotional state, and calm down, turn off that sympathetic nervous system, kick in the parasympathetic nervous system, and be able to calm themselves down and contain the emotion that may rise up in the course of therapy. Any therapy whatsoever, but EMDR particularly because, as you know, those strong emotions are part of the memory network of whatever trauma we're dealing with. So
and actually, let me say about shifting states.
Yeah.
It's not just for dealing with therapy. This is a life skill set.
Absolutely. That's right. There's something they can do in between sessions and in real life.
Right?
I shift states quite frequently driving on the freeway in Southern California.
I bet you do. Some more pleasant than others.
Yeah.
I've driven with you before.
So that you have. So I would start there. So I'll say that part. And why don't you give some ideas about your view of at the end of a session now. We've done the preparation.
Right.
And we've, taught them necessary skills. However, they are at a situation, they may have dealt with a very severe trauma. And with that trauma in those memory networks are strong emotions, which, as an EMDR therapist, we do not shy away from because that's part of the memory network, because that's getting the stuff out. We're not making them upset. We're releasing the upset that's already stored. Right. That's why we know that we're where we need to be. After one of those sessions, what are some of the things you like to do?
Well, and I think even before that, I think a question that often gets asked is how long, just as a reminder, everyone, we're talking about phase 7 closure. That's what we're talking about right now. But the question that gets asked all the time is, how long do I need in order to do phase 7 closure? And the answer, of course, is it depends.
It depends. One of your favorite
It is. That's
quotes.
My favorite answer to everything is it depends.
It depends.
So it depends on how upset your client is. It depends on what their skill sets are. It depends on if it's complex PTSD, they're highly dissociative or not. So there's a lot of things that go into this. And the answer also, it depends, changes from session to session. Right? If I've got a client who has an important meeting coming up after our session, I want to spend more time in phase 7 closure and make sure they're wrapped up really tight so they can get back to the rest of their life. Where if they're going to go home and chill for, a day, it may not be quite as crucial, right? So all of these things will go into that decision-making process, that clinical decision-making process about how long do we need. For some people, it could be 20 minutes.
Right.
Other people, it could be literally be 2 minutes. And this is, by the way, and you've heard us talk about this, is that, dissociation is not scary. It can be an absolute gift. This is a place where dissociation can be a gift. Because with our dissociative folks, sometimes, all we need to do is change the topic. What are you doing this weekend? Hey, tell me what's coming up. And they package it up themselves, and they're not even aware that they've done it. But this, again, can be a lovely skill set that they already have.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because when we teach container exercises, when we teach safe, calm place, what we're really doing is a dissociative exercise. The use of dissociation in a way it was meant to be, a positive way. Other people would, instead of saying dissociation, they would say compartmentalization.
Yes, we don't dissociate. We compartmentalize.
We compartmentalize. No, you're dissociating. Or I remember we used to talk about bracketing. Now, in therapy, you and I know, or first responders, you and I know that we may have had a difficult session, a very tough session with one of our clients, or we get a phone call that's upsetting just before we go in to see our patients. You and I, all therapists, have to bracket. They have to contain. They have to compartmentalize. They have to put aside that event to be fully present with their patient or dealing with the next issue coming in. And there's nothing wrong with that. Of course, the problem is that a lot of times these little boxes are put on the shelves of compartmentalized events, and they're never gone back to. Nobody ever goes back to deal with them. And that's the condition that many of our first responders find and our patients find. They compartmentalize it, they bury it, it's done. But the brain is not made to keep things hidden. The brain is designed to remove those things that are not meant to be there. And trauma is like that splinter that gets into your finger. Mm-hmm. And, if we can't get the splinter out of our finger, that finger is going to get red and inflamed and infected. And the purpose of that is to push that splinter out. And so our patient's symptoms when they come in are basically that inflammation that is trying to push out the splinter of trauma that they've been holding in there for so long. The body's built to release it, and that's what we're doing.
So let's go back to phase 7 closure with the question of how long does it take? And this is, again, as you get to know your clients better, and again, whatever's happening up with their day, and you make that decision 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever your client needs. I always start with looking at the clock because we have to manage time. I look at the clock and then say to my clients, we're about out of time. Are you okay to stop here? And actually, let me even back up from that. As I'm looking at the clock, realizing the time, one of the things that I may do is I may do a cognitive interweave to help them get maybe to a better stopping place than where they are currently. And that is something that we get to do as well.
That's right. It was one of the appropriate uses of cognitive interweave. As time constraints that happen. Mm-hmm. And you suggested this a minute ago, but one of the very simple things to do is at the end of a session is to begin to ask them questions. Mm-hmm. Like you said, where are you going after this? Is your son still playing soccer? Mm-hmm. How's that project going at work? Things that relate to them, because when we ask a question, it requires them to tighten up their cognitive process and to answer the specific question, which is one of the reasons we don't ask questions doing EMDR therapy, by the way, because that tightens them up. We want them to be loose then, to move. But at the end, we want to tighten them, asking them questions, getting into conversations that they shift states from what they're doing into something else in present life, or what's going to happen next. And so that's one way of tightening them up. Mm-hmm. And plus, you and I, we do teach the container exercises. Mm-hmm. We talk about, other ways of, grounding exercises, tossing a pillow back and forth.
Right.
Having them touch things that help center them, the feet on the floor, a soft pillow, or animal that animals are a great thing if it's virtual, and that's very, very grounding for people. Grounding exercises are things we can do. And you're right, it depends on the client. And it depends not within the client what they've dealt with in that session.
Mm-hmm.
The same client that you be able to close up in 2 minutes, you go through some memories and you're going to take 10 minutes to close up.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish I could say we automatically knew when the time started how
Right.
much time it takes, but
Right.
part of it is just experience with that client.
And it's part of attunement of EMDR therapy that we often talk about as well. So another question that I ask my clients is, are you okay to leave or do you need something? And I tell them during phase 2 preparation, that is a question I will ask them. And I tell them they don't need to know what they need. I've got lots of somethings. And whether it's a container, and it can be an imagined container or it can be a real container, Curt and I both do those differently, but there's tons of different ways to do that. Whether it's a grounding exercise, a breathing exercise, tossing the pillow, looking around the room and seeing 5 things, hearing 4 things, those kinds of exercises, any and all of those, are they okay to leave or do they need something? And I think that's an important question because that is, again, it's giving them a lot of power and control in their life about what's right for them.
And one of the things that I've continued to do long since my EMDR training, before I was trained in EMDR therapy, is me, I talk about the recordings I often make with patients. I will do a 15-minute kind of relaxation grounding exercise,
Mm-hmm.
and I take their smartphone and I download that free app. I think it's called Recorder Pro, and I put it on airplane mode so that way text and phone calls don't disrupt the recording. I learned that the hard way. And I will make a recording with my voice, and they could take it home on their phone and they can listen to it in between sessions. So it's not just at the end of the session that we need to help to close them up, but in between session, the stabilizing techniques and things like that they learn can be applied. And so those kinds of things I still do because it helps them in between sessions.
And that is a really important point of if our clients get dysregulated outside of their window of tolerance between sessions, what do? And I have my clients make up a list
Yes.
of all kinds of goodies that we have practiced, and whether it's breathing, safe, calm place, any EMDR resourcing, any non-EMDR resourcing, like you were just mentioning animals, right? Petting their dogs, smells, whatever it is that helps get them back within their window of tolerance, that I have them put that on the front of their phone.
Yeah.
So they can, when they're not thinking, because their prefrontal cortex has gone offline, they can just pick up their phone and look at it and go, right, oh, okay, let me go get some lemon and I can smell a lemon.
Exactly. And getting into nature, if they can walk outside, if they can do that, sitting, hug a tree. I mean that in a real way, because there's something about trees and nature that really does help us regulate. And those are very useful things. And of course, the final thing, once they've gone through the list that you've taught them to do, there's a quick phone call to the therapist that can be very helpful in stabilizing and containing. Right. And sometimes I've just left a message on their cell phone that if they're upset, they'll turn on the cell phone, they'll listen to that recording, and it's just, hi, this is Curt. I'm here. Take some deep, slow breaths. You're okay. Everything has a beginning, middle, and an end. Just some sort of positive thing. And they can listen to, and a number of times they appreciate that because, we often are their first and only safe, stable place, particularly when we're dealing with the individuals that suffer from complex PTSD and those kinds of attachment disorder traumas.
And what I tell people too is they can always just dump a message into my voicemail. Let me know if they need me to call them back or not. Then my voicemail becomes part of their container. And I'd say 90% of the time we can talk about this in session. I just need to put it someplace.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. All right. Let's talk about some other common errors in phase 7 closure. When we're doing safe, calm place in phase 7, literally all we do is say, remember your safe, calm place, bring it up. That's it. No BLS.
Right.
There's no BLS. When we do the container, there's no BLS. There's no BLS during phase 7 closure.
That's right. And a lot of people make that mistake because they've helped create that safe, calm place in the phase 2 preparation, in which they're taught to do slow and short BLSs. And they often will carry that into closure because the other mistake they make, let's talk about this, is we're talking about eye movements now, or BLSs, is the use of slow eye movements during the installation phase.
Oh, yeah, that's an error
Phase
that's come up all over the
5.
place. Yeah.
Oh yeah, they think, oh well, it's positive, and we did positive things in preparation, so now I must do slow and few. And people forget that the stages, phases 4, 5, and 6, the desensitization, the installation, and the body scan are all reprocessing phases. And if there are negative things, we want those negative things to arise during those times. So that's why it's fast and regular.
And that is the reason why we don't do even slow BLS in phase 7. Because I'm sure y'all have noticed at times you do safe, calm place, and all of a sudden trauma material comes up, right?
Right.
So no BLS of any kind during phase 7. All right. The other thing you do not do during phase 7 closure is you don't ask the SUDS, you don't ask the VOC, you don't do a body scan, because we do that to open channels, right? To
Right.
get them moving. We want them closing down, not opening up.
You can do all of that prior to closure, but once closure's started, you never go back and assess the SUDS, the VOC, or the body scan, because that, like you said, it opens them up again.
Mm-hmm. All right, Curt, I have another question for you that I've had people ask. Like we've discussed in our trainings all the time, how do you recognize dissociation, right? Well, how do you recognize if they're actually grounded and actually okay to walk out to end a session?
Well, one of the things is they can look me in the eye, and they can tell me what they're doing when they leave.
Mm-hmm.
If they're stammering, or that they have that 1,000-yard stare that you
Right.
often see as in dissociative process, then I'm going to talk with them a little more. I'm going to do some more grounding exercises. I'm going to ask them how they feel. And what I love, going back to Jim Knipe's wonderful work in EMDR Toolbox, which is a must read for anyone that does EMDR therapy, is his back of the head scale. Where the very back of the head is really out. I'm really not present. And the front of the face is I am fully present. And that's one of the way of teaching our clients, to assess their own level of dissociation. And it's really amazing how good they can become at doing that.
Yeah, I teach my version of Jim's scale, which I like better, of course, but naturally.
Naturally.
I do that during phase 2 preparation. And anytime during reprocessing, if a client starts to dissociate out of their window of tolerance, where they're more gone than present, they can simply tell me by showing me where they're at in that.
Yeah.
So this is what I want everyone to remember. Sometimes you're going to have your clients walk out and you're going to be wrong. You're going to think that they're all grounded and all wrapped up nice and tight and pretty, and you're going to be wrong. And that's okay, because you're part of that whole process of containing and keeping them safe, and they'll reach back out to you. And
Yes, they
okay.
will. And like you said, I've had patients where I've had to leave 20 minutes at the end of the session to bring them back and to really ground them. But I only learned that through not knowing that in the beginning.
Right.
And that's something we learned together in the process of working together.
Mm-hmm. I've had clients that, we take so long to get them all set up and so long to get them all wrapped up that if I get 15 minutes of reprocessing in, I'm ecstatic, right?
That's right. And there's some agencies where they're time limited, like 45 minutes. And I've learned this from some of our EMDR people that have taken EMDR into those agencies, 45-minute hour, which seems so small. But they do the rule of threes, 15 minutes of talking about what we call the cows, calms, and cods. Crisis of the moment, crisis of the week, crisis of the day, and then 15 minutes of reprocessing and maybe 10, 15 minutes of closure, because any amount of reprocessing is better than no reprocessing.
Absolutely. So take with you the idea that you will close it down, sometimes better than others. Sometimes our clients will let us know how they're doing. Sometimes they won't. That's just all part of the process. But you are part of their support network. You're part of their container. And you're doing great work. Please don't stop doing it.
You're part of the closure.
Mm-hmm. Thank you all for all that you do. And to thank you, we offer a coupon for you for any of our advanced trainings. We appreciate all that you bring. and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you all for listening. And if you have any ideas of something you'd like Michelle and I to cover at any time, just give us an email. Thank you very much for listening.